Are your negative thoughts holding you back? Are you tired of letting these thoughts stop you from living your best life? Watch today's video for 5 ways to overcome your negative thoughts. My name is Diana Garcia. I'm a licensed therapist in Florida and owner of a private practice called Nurturing Minds Counseling. All right, hit that subscribe button now to get more tips to improve your mental health, deal with anxiety, negative thoughts, and things like that. All right, let's jump into today's video. Okay, tip number 1, completely reframe the way you're looking at your negative thoughts. So what I mean by that, there's a couple different things about this tip. It's really helpful to understand that you actually don't have that much control that these thoughts are showing up. I always tell clients, it's not like you could just turn off a light switch, right? And these thoughts are going to go away. And actually, the more you try to get rid of these thoughts or challenge these thoughts, the only thing it does, it reminds you that these thoughts are there. So really, it's shifting your perspective from your negative thoughts. One, acknowledging that they're completely normal. We all have negative thoughts, whether it's negative thoughts about ourselves, negative thoughts about others, negative thoughts about the world, negative thoughts about a situation. We all have them. And to a certain degree, that's one way that our mind is programmed to make sure that we can survive, that we can problem solve and things like that. But mainly, the more you can accept that it's really normal and common, maybe we don't talk about it as much, but just acknowledge they're there, but we don't actually have to get rid of them, or that we have this thought means anything about us. And that's really crucial. A lot of times the content of the thoughts don't really matter. It's a thought, right? It's something that's being generated from your mind. But the more we can just notice them and let go of the struggle to not have them, to get rid of them, that's really going to be a game changer for you. And that's really, really huge, because the more you can start to learn to change your relationship with these thoughts, right? So I sometimes give the analogy of like, are your thoughts here or your thoughts here? Right? A lot of times when we get stuck with negative thoughts, it's like here. We can't see anything else and they're clouding our vision. And so we need to really create some space so they're over here, and then I can choose to live my life and be more intentional. Instead of looking from these thoughts, I'm looking at these thoughts. And that's a really crucial distinction, right? And in that work, you actually it doesn't matter what thoughts you have. And I often tell clients that I don't really care if a thought is true or not. And this might sound morbid, but we all have the thought that like we're going to die. That's a true thought, right? No one can really debate that. But that thought can serve different kind of meanings to different people. So for example, one person might have the thought, I'm going to die. And that thought actually really propels them to live their life in a really kind of meaningful way, right? Check things off of their bucket list. For someone else, this same thought might cause so much fear and really shrink their lives in ways that feels unmanageable. And so that true thought, it doesn't really matter that it's true. It's the way that I react to that thought that really makes a difference. So again, key takeaway from number 1 tip, let go of the struggle. We all have negative thoughts. Like button now to let me know that you're going to drop the struggle, that you're going to acknowledge that we all have negative thoughts and that you don't have to do so much work to get rid of them. Hit that like button now. Number 2, it's really all about a question that you can start to ask yourself to really help yourself start to shift this relationship with your thoughts. Because like I just said, it doesn't matter what the content of the thought is or that you're having it. It's really the impact that it has in your life, right? So when I have a thought, I'm not good enough, right? How do I let that thought influence me, right? If that thought really causes me to then not apply for a job or not go on a date or not work on my fitness because I think I can't do it, I'm not good enough, then that thought, that negative thought isn't really serving me, right? Listening to that thought is not helping me move forward. And so it's helpful to understand, it's almost like understanding the relationship between whatever the negative thought is and how it influences my behaviors. And one way to do that is just to ask yourself, where is my mind trying to pull me here, right? Because I even want to acknowledge that sometimes we'll have something happen and then that triggers a whole kind of spiral into this history or past. So maybe, I don't know, you walk into a bar and you see a group of your coworkers and they're laughing and they're smiling and you see that and your thought is like, oh my gosh, they're judging me. They're laughing at me. I'm not part of the group. They're making comments about me. And then that starts to go down this rabbit hole of like something like, oh my gosh, I am weird. Something is wrong with me. I'm so awkward. And I remember when I was in college, same thing. I couldn't really make friends. I couldn't fit in. And oh my gosh, remember when I was in middle school and I had that situation happen to me and that person told me I was weird and I looked weird and I talked weird, right? Like just look what happened there, right? Like here's a situation where the truth is we actually don't know in that moment when you say you see colleagues, right, laughing and joking, it could have nothing to do with you. right? But there your mind made an assumption and made a story, right? And typically, right, in this instance, it was a negative story about you, judging you, negative thoughts about yourself. It might even have negative thoughts about them, right? But in this example that I did, it was negative thoughts about myself. And off to the races we go. Look, I went from this one situation to now all of a sudden I'm like in the trenches of middle school me and feeling like crap and shame and so forth, right? So what I want to acknowledge here, it's like asking yourself, again, where is my mind trying to pull me here? And if it's pulling you in a direction that isn't really helpful in this moment, just notice that. And again, like I said, it's not like you have to do so much work to challenge that. Just notice kind of like the chain of events and like the rabbit hole that you're in. Notice, take a moment to like sit with the discomfort, because for whatever reason, this situation brought all these events to mind. And okay, it obviously, if I'm thinking about middle school me who was maybe bullied or had these negative comments and that hurts in this moment, it makes me scared that it's going to happen again. Oof, right? Making room for that pain in that moment, and also acknowledging, oh my gosh, my mind just like time travel 20 years from now, and that's not what's happening, right? In this moment, the thing that's happening is there's this situation, and is there another way for me to react, right? So again, asking yourself, where is my mind pulling me? Okay, the third tip is really, this is more of like a concrete exercise, because I want to give you a mix of things that you can do to help you overcome negative thoughts. So again, once we acknowledge that thoughts are just thoughts, right? We really want to start to acknowledge when we're getting hooked by them, and when we are, right? When we are in the weeds of our thoughts, we want to do some exercises to help us, again, create some space, right? So go from here to here. And one way to do that is really almost have like a playful, silly attitude with some thoughts. Now, here's a caveat. Depending on the content of your thoughts, if it feels so difficult to do this exercise, that's fine. Use some of the other tips that I'm talking about in this video. But what I really notice, even the most difficult thoughts, the more you can start to really shift your reaction to them and do different things to help you do that, the less kind of sting they're going to have, right? So it's almost like they start to lose their punch, right? Because you keep hearing them and keep seeing them, right? And so one way to do this is just exercise of like, imagine your thought, right? So pick a negative thought that you have, one that you struggle with. I'll give you a moment to think about that. Again, in this example, I'll use the thought like, I'm not good enough, right? So that thought about me, something about me, I'm not good enough, which triggers this feeling of shame. Again, so if I have that I'm not good enough thought, I can then imagine this thought on a computer screen, right? Kind of like a screensaver, but like imagine this thought in different fonts, imagine this thought, different colors, imagine this thought like bouncing around, right? And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to have an example here. So notice like this thought and see it. And again, maybe I first read it and like, I'm not good enough. Oof. Maybe initially that causes me to have a reaction, but the longer this goes and the longer I start just giving myself space to read this. And so typically sometimes I'll encourage clients in a different type of exercise to repeat a thought for a period of time until it starts to lose the sting per se. And so in this instance, just like noticing these thoughts and like in this moment, like noticing the truth is, this is just a string of words made up of letters in the English language, right? That the truth is I'm assigning meaning to it and it's causing me this huge reaction. But it's literally, if I pick it apart, it's like, I don't know how many letters, how many words. Can I just notice that, right? And notice that that's just language. That's just thoughts. That's just my mind doing what it's doing. It doesn't have to mean anything greater. Again, and I can still make room for maybe the initial shame that comes up when I have that thought, but I can also notice like, wow, look at that thought in this weird, animation and so forth. So again, if this exercise is helpful for you, try it, right? Maybe even use Canva and try it for yourself. If not, try another one. So the fourth tip is really starting to embody a little bit more of just being kind to yourself. And one really, really easy way to think about this, it's like thinking, again, pick whatever thought that you struggle with, a negative thought, whether it's about yourself. Again, a lot of this is focused on thoughts about yourself, but it could be like a negative thought about someone else. It could be a thought about the world, right? But in the context for this one, I'd say like, okay, let's pick a negative thought that you struggle with about yourself. And again, a lot of these thoughts, I'll ask my clients like, how old is this thought, right? And for most people, some of these thoughts have been there for a really, really long time, right? They can say like, man, Some people say like, I remember in middle school having a thought that I'm not good enough. Or some people will tell me, I remember in elementary school having that thought. So this like really, really old thought, right? And so the youngest kind of moment that you can remember having this thought or a version of this thought, right? What's really helpful is then kind of picture like 8-year-old self, right? 8-year-old Diana having the thought, I'm not good enough, right? And sometimes I'll even prompt clients like, do you have a picture of 8-year-old you, right? Can you bring that in? Can we really look at that? And can you spend a moment just imagining what it must have been like for 8-year-old you to have this really painful thought that in that moment, that little you believed this thought and believed this negative thing about yourself was true. And maybe you still do, right? But again, for the purpose of this exercise, it's almost like imagine what that would be like and see yourself, right? So like big you looking down at little you. Right? And little you having this uncomfortable thought and this negative thought about themselves and the pain. And can you in this moment, like give little you what you think they need in this moment, right? If they have the thought, I'm not good enough, what does little you need from you, right? Can you give that little you some like kindness, love, right? Even imagine hugging them, right? Whatever that would look like. But seeing little you can maybe generate so much more compassion and empathy. And so it's really helpful, especially if some of these negative thoughts, like I said, are older. It's helpful to then maybe make some room for some compassion to really have a little bit more of this like inner ally with some of these thoughts so that this inner critic, when it shows up, you can start to shift it, that it's there. And maybe it's an acknowledgement that there's something about this thought, there's a pain or longing that at some point you needed. And can you give that to yourself now? I know this is a very visual like exercise and much more guided. And some people really like that. Some people don't. I also notice that sometimes when you struggle with being very highly self-critical, some of these exercises of loving kindness or self-compassion can be difficult, and that's okay. What I'd encourage you, it's like work your way to that, right? There's different ways, again, to think about this. Think about like, maybe if little you is really hard, then think about like if someone you love and care about had this thought, right? So like, think about like, your 8-year-old nephew, right? If he had this thought, like what would you want to give him? Because if maybe you're not yet ready to give it to yourself, a lot of times it might be easier to give it to someone else. And then just practicing that skill that eventually you're going to learn to turn on yourself. Heart emoji in the comments below to let me know that you either did this exercise and were able to give little you what they needed, or you're going to practice and committing to yourself to continue doing that, right? So give me that heart emoji below to let me know that that's an ongoing practice for you. All right, the 5th tip is really understanding like what this negative thought, and this one would apply again, thoughts about others, thoughts about the world, how it's somehow linked to something that matters to you, right? So again, this thought about like the example of like I walk into a bar, I see my coworkers are smiling and laughing, I have the assumption it's about me, and then I think I'm not good enough, right? And so if we back up a little bit and if we see like, okay, this experience, like what is it about this experience? Is there something that's important to you here, right? Maybe you value social connections. Maybe you want to be accepted by your peers, right? That's a value of yours that's important for you. Belonging, right? We all long for belonging. That's just a normal human drive. I know some people are going to say, no, I don't need that, but it really is. But again, if we think about any kind of negative thought, right? Any context, right? So maybe I have a thought that I'm not a good enough therapist. I do have that thought, actually. Let's be honest. Sometimes I have that thought, I'm not a good enough therapist. And then if I really link that thought to a value of mine, it's important for me to be competent and do a good job and try to provide the best care I can to my clients, right? So this like negative thought also reminds me about a value of mine that's super, super important. So if you can start to have that frame, again, because we're not trying to get so stuck on what it's saying, but understand why this is important to you, and then take that a step further and understand then what would be a small action that you could do in line with what's important to you, not necessarily the negative thought, right? So again, if I use my example, for me, what would be important, it's like, okay, If that means like I try to be as present as possible as a therapist, I try to be open to feedback, I try to continue learning, right? Those are all actions that are tied to this thought, like that remind me of my values, and I want to be a competent and good therapist. And this negative thought reminds me of that. Now, if these negative thoughts get me stuck, and whether it tells me like, don't see clients or pick a different profession, right? Or don't try so hard, right? Like, then that thought isn't helpful for me. So what I want you to think about, it's linking this negative thought to something that matters, and then taking that a step further and thinking of a small action that would be in line with what matters to you, not so much the negative thought. Because at the end of the day, whenever I'm working with someone, what's really important, it's not letting these negative thoughts like stop you from living the life you want to live or showing up to your life in a way that feels meaningful for you. And you're the only one that gets to decide what that looks like. Not me, not your family, not your partner. You're the one that gets to decide what meaningful looks like. But again, when I think of negative thoughts, really where people get stuck and how to overcome them, it's learning how to have them without letting them like stop you or get you so stuck throughout the way. And of course, we all get stuck sometimes. That's just human nature. But that's why I want to tie it to that small action, because the small actions, you're going to keep building on them, right? And then you're going to start to notice like, wow, I can have this negative thought without listening to it. And I can be very intentional about how I react to that thought and still do a behavior that's important to me in this area that matters. More tips like this to help you overcome your negative thoughts and really stop letting this inner critic stop you from living the life that's important to you, then go order my book now, Negative Thoughts Happen: How to Find Your Inner Ally When Your Inner Critic Shows Up. You can order by looking at the link below, check my link tree, or if you want more information, you can check out the landing page, www.negativethoughtshappen.com. This book is filled with tools to help you learn, like some of these tools I mentioned in this video, but much, much more tools to help you understand your relationship with your negative thoughts and actionable things that you can start to do in order to stop letting them control your life. All right, guys, like I always say, I hope this was helpful, and I encourage you to continue nurturing your mind, body, and soul, whatever that looks like for you. Thanks, guys.